The sun was setting over Hollow's End, the small town that had never quite outgrown its 1950s charm, complete with faded storefronts, waving American flags, and a population that counted more memories than people. Every July 4th, the whole town gathered at the old fairground on the edge of town for the fireworks show. It was the kind of tradition everyone expected, a comforting ritual of hot dogs, cotton candy, and sparklers. This year, though, something felt different. Jenna had never been one for town celebrations, but her best friend, Mark, had dragged her along. They were 17, caught between the reckless freedom of summer and the looming responsibilities of their senior year. Jenna tugged her hoodie tighter as a cool breeze stirred the long grass beneath their feet. "Come on, you're freezing," Mark said, nudging her shoulder with a grin that barely masked his nerves. Jenna laughed, the sound sharp in the growing dusk. "It's just a breeze. You act like it's October." Mark glanced around the crowd, his eyes catching the flicker of red, white, and blue fireworks starting to pop above the trees. "You really don't want to be here," he said, voice dropping low. "Not after what happened last year." She raised an eyebrow. "You mean Old Man Peterson's accident? That was months ago. Just a freak thing." Mark didn't answer. Instead, he stared toward the woods bordering the fairground, where shadows gathered and stretched like hungry fingers. Jenna followed his gaze. The forest had always looked strange to her, too dark, too still. Tonight, it seemed alive, waiting. "Don't start," she said. "I'm not in the mood for your ghost stories." But Mark was already lost in his thoughts. "They say the forest is cursed. That's why the fireworks never go off near the treeline," Jenna scoffed. "Urban legends. People say a lot of dumb things when they don't want to face reality." "Maybe," Mark said, "but something's wrong this year. The air feels thick. Like the whole town's holding its breath." As the first fireworks exploded above, painting the sky in bursts of gold and crimson, Jenna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the breeze. The fairground was alive with the scent of charcoal and popcorn, laughter blending with the crackle of sparklers. Families spread out on warm blankets, kids darting between tables and rides. The flagpole at the center stood tall, the stars and stripes snapping crisply in the wind. Jenna and Mark found a spot near the edge of the field, just where the trees began. Mark pulled a flask from his jacket, took a quick swig, and offered it to Jenna. She declined, but watched as his hands trembled. "Let's just watch the show," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Forget all this creepy forest talk." They sat in silence, the crowd's cheers rising as fireworks burst overhead in a glorious symphony of light and sound. But beneath the spectacle, Jenna noticed something else. Something moving at the tree line. A figure, small and shrouded in shadow, slipping between the trunks. "Did you see that?" Jenna whispered, nudging Mark. He nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah. Someone's out there. Probably a kid trying to sneak off," she said. "Or maybe an animal." But as another firework lit up the sky, the figure stepped forward, revealing pale skin, wide eyes reflecting the explosions. It stood unnervingly still, staring right at them. Jenna's heart hammered. "Who is that?" Mark shook his head. "I don't know, but we shouldn't stay here." The crowd's attention was drawn upward again, a new cascade of fireworks painting the sky in blue and silver. But Jenna couldn't tear her eyes from the figure. It was a girl, maybe 12, dressed in a tattered white dress that fluttered in the wind like a ghost's veil. Slowly, the girl stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound on the grass. The crowd's chatter faded in Jenna's ears, replaced by a ringing that grew louder with each heartbeat. "Mark," she whispered, gripping his arm. "We need to get out of here." He was already moving, pulling her toward the edge of the field, away from the girl and the darkening woods. But the girl's lips parted in a silent scream, and a cold wind swept through the crowd, extinguishing sparklers and candles alike. A hush fell over Hollow's End as the final fireworks sputtered and died, leaving the night suddenly empty and black. Then, from the shadows of the trees, a voice rose, soft, eerie, and unmistakably human. "Welcome home." The words hung in the night like a frozen breath, slipping from the darkness beyond the trees. Jenna's skin prickled, goosebumps rising despite the summer heat. She spun around, searching for the source, but the forest edge remained an impenetrable wall of shadows. Mark squeezed her hand tight, his eyes darting nervously. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "Yeah," Jenna said, swallowing hard. Who said that?" The crowd around them stirred uneasily, some turning toward the tree line, others exchanging confused glances. The mayor's voice crackled weakly over the PA system, but the speaker was dead silent, swallowed by static. "Everyone, please stay calm," the mayor urged, his voice tense. "We're checking the system. The show will resume shortly." Jenna didn't hear a word of it. The hairs along her neck stood on end as a strange sense of wrongness tightened around the fairground, like a noose slowly cinching. From the darkness, the pale girl stepped forward again. This time, she was closer, so close Jenna could see the dirt smudges on her knees, the tangled mess of hair hanging over her face. Her eyes were black pools, reflecting nothing but void. Without warning, she screamed. Not a normal scream, but a shrill, piercing sound that sliced through the night, driving the blood in Jenna's veins cold. People screamed back, clutching their ears, stumbling away. Children cried out for their parents, the festive mood shattered in an instant. Mark pulled Jenna behind a picnic table as the girl's scream echoed again, reverberating like a banshee's wail. And then the fireflies that had dotted the dark corners of the forest seemed to flicker out, as if the night itself was holding its breath. "What the hell is that?" Jenna gasped, trying to steady her shaking hands. Mark's face was pale. "It's her. The girl who disappeared 5 years ago." Jenna's breath caught. She'd heard the story, like everyone in Hollow's End had. A little girl named Emily Peterson, lost in those very woods on the night of the 4th of July, never found. "The search parties never found a trace," Mark said. "But some say she never left." Jenna glanced toward the tree line again. The shadows seemed to ripple, thickening into shapes that flickered just beyond sight, faces, twisted and pale, staring out from the black. A cold wind blew, carrying the faint scent of smoke and something metallic, like rusted iron. "We need to get out," Jenna said urgently. "Now." They pushed through the crowd, the panic spreading fast as more people spotted the ghostly figure moving closer to the fairground. Behind them, the eerie chorus of voices rose, whispering in unison. "Come home, come home." Jenna ran, Mark right beside her, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. As they reached the edge of the parking lot, Jenna looked back once more. The pale girl stood at the tree line, motionless, watching them go with those empty eyes. Then, without warning, the sky exploded in a final burst of crimson fire. And the world went dark. Darkness swallowed the fairground in an instant, plunging Hollow's End into a silence so thick it pressed against Jenna's ears. The fireworks' last glow died like a candle's flame, leaving only the faintest shimmer of stars above. The crowd scattered like startled birds, shouts and cries fracturing the stillness. Jenna's breath came ragged as she and Mark stumbled toward their car, the gravel crunching sharply beneath their feet. "Where's your phone?" Mark gasped, fisting the air. "We need light." Jenna patted her pockets frantically. "In my bag." She pulled it out and flicked on the flashlight, the beam cutting a narrow swath through the dark. "Good," Mark said, eyes scanning the woods that hemmed the parking lot. "Because we're not alone." The forest edge seemed alive with movement, dark shapes slipping between tree trunks, something stalking in the shadows. Jenna's heart hammered in terror. Suddenly, a soft sobbing floated through the air, distant yet impossibly close, wrapping around them like a ghost's embrace. "It's her," Mark whispered, voice tight. Emily! Jenna shivered, the beam of her flashlight trembling as it flicked toward the sound. The sobbing grew louder, turning into a low, desperate wail. We can't just leave her out there, Jenna said, voice shaking. She's a kid. Mark shook his head, face grim. It's not her. It's something wearing her face. A cold wind swept through, carrying the faint scent of burning wood and iron. Jenna gagged, the metallic tang thick on her tongue. Come back! A whisper breathed out of the darkness. Come home! The words weren't spoken, but felt pressed against her mind like an icy hand. Mark grabbed Jenna's arm. Run! They bolted toward the street, lungs burning, but the forest seemed to reach after them, branches scraping like claws, shadows stretching longer, darker. A flash of white darted across the trees behind them, a flash of that tattered dress. Look out! Jenna screamed as a figure lunged. Mark shoved her aside, crashing into the gravel. Pain bloomed in his shoulder, but he scrambled up, dragging Jenna with him. They burst into the street, the town's few streetlights flickering weakly, offering a fragile shield against the creeping darkness. Panting, Jenna locked eyes with Mark. What the hell is happening here? He swallowed hard. I don't know. But I think Emily wants something, or someone. Behind them, the forest seemed to pulse with life, a living nightmare waiting just beyond the flickering light. Jenna and Mark reached Jenna's car, the silver sedan parked haphazardly near the curb, its surface slick with the evening's humidity. Jenna fumbled with her keys, hands trembling so badly she dropped them twice before the door finally unlocked with a sharp click. Get in, Mark urged, glancing nervously over his shoulder toward the black forest line. The trees swayed, though the air was still, and somewhere deep within the shadows, Jenna could swear she saw a flicker of white, like a girl's dress catching a ghostly breeze. Jenna threw the door open and slid inside, slamming it shut behind her. She locked the doors as Mark climbed in beside her, both their breaths ragged in the tight silence. For a moment, all that filled the car was the sound of their panting, and then Jenna's phone buzzed violently in her bag. She grabbed it, the screen lighting up with dozens of missed calls and messages, from her mom, her little brother, even her best friend who had stayed behind at the fairground. She shook her head. No signal. The network's dead. Mark's eyes darkened. That's not good. Jenna tried the engine, but the car groaned and sputtered, refusing to start. What? She whispered. No way. Mark slammed his fist on the steering wheel. Of course. Of course. Outside, the faint glow of distant streetlights flickered uncertainly, then dimmed. The world around them seemed to shrink, the shadows swallowing the edges of the windows like ink seeping into paper. Then came the first knock. Soft at first, like fingertips tapping on glass. Jenna's eyes darted to the driver's side window. Nothing. A second knock, louder. Mark froze. Don't look. A third knock, urgent, impatient. Jenna's hand trembled as she raised the flashlight from her bag, the beam slicing through the thick blackness outside. There, pressed against the glass, just outside the passenger window, was the pale face of the girl. Emily. Her black eyes bore into Jenna's soul, and her mouth opened to form one word. Home. Jenna screamed, the sound torn from her throat, as the car lights flickered and died, plunging them into a suffocating darkness. The darkness was absolute now, an oppressive blanket pressing down on Jenna and Mark inside the car. The flashlight's beam flickered erratically, barely illuminating the glass where Emily's face lingered, pale and still, her black eyes unblinking and endless. Jenna's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Mark's breath came shallow, his gaze locked on the window. Please, Jenna whispered, voice breaking. Just go away. But Emily's face twisted, not into anger, but a mournful pleading. Then her lips moved again, mouthing the words so softly it was barely audible. Come! Suddenly, the car shuddered violently, as if gripped by invisible hands shaking it like a toy. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died, leaving them stranded in the suffocating dark. Mark slammed his fists against the door. "We have to get out. We can't stay here." Jenna nodded, swallowing the rising panic. She unlocked the door and swung it open. The night air hit her like a cold wave, carrying the scent of damp earth and burning. Outside, the forest loomed, shadows alive with shifting shapes. The fairground lights had all gone out. Only the faint glow of the moon fought against the blackness. Emily stood just beyond the car, her white dress fluttering in a wind Jenna couldn't feel. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "Home," she whispered again. Jenna's heart hammered. She looked at Mark, who was already moving, pulling her away from the car. "We need to run," he said. "Back to town." But as they stepped onto the cracked pavement, the ground beneath them trembled, subtle at first, then stronger, as if the earth itself was waking. From the forest came a chorus of voices, children's laughter, cries, and whispers, swirling around them, confusing and cruel. "Stay together!" Mark shouted, grabbing Jenna's hand. They ran toward the dim glow of the main street, the voices rising in a terrible crescendo. And then the ground cracked open behind them, splitting with a deafening roar. Jenna dared a glance back. From the fissure emerged figures, ghostly children, their eyes dark and hollow, faces twisted in eternal sorrow. Emily led them all, stepping forward, reaching for Jenna and Mark with hands like ice. Jenna screamed again, the scream swallowed by the night as they dashed into the failing light of Hollow's End, the ghost chasing close behind. The town's dim streetlights flickered weakly as Jenna and Mark stumbled onto Main Street, breath ragged, hearts hammering in their chests. The usual 4th of July bustle was gone, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed down like a weight. Empty storefronts stared at them with dark, lifeless windows. "Where is everyone?" Jenna whispered, her voice cracking. Mark shook his head. "They all left. Or, they never came back." Behind them, the faint echo of children's laughter haunted the night, a chilling reminder that the ghosts had not yet given up the chase. "We have to find help," Mark said, pulling Jenna toward the small diner at the corner, the one place that always stayed open late. As they pushed open the diner's door, a bell tinkled, but the inside was deserted. Chairs were overturned, and a thin layer of dust covered the counters. "Hello?" Jenna called out, her voice trembling. No answer. Suddenly, the jukebox sputtered to life, playing a warped, distorted version of "America the Beautiful." The melody warped and slowed, as if underwater. Jenna's skin crawled. From the corner booth, a shadow shifted. A man emerged, tall, gaunt, eyes glowing faintly red. "Looking for someone?" he said, voice low and menacing. Mark stepped in front of Jenna, fists clenched. "Who are you?" The man smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. "I am the keeper of Hollow's End secrets. And tonight, you're part of the story." Jenna's heart dropped. The stories she'd heard about this town, about the disappearances, the curse, they were all true. Outside, the voices grew louder. The ghosts were coming. The man's grin widened. "You can't run. You're already home." The man's shadow stretched long across the cracked linoleum floor as he stepped closer, the dim diner lights flickering ominously overhead. Jenna's pulse thudded painfully in her ears, her fingers digging into Mark's arm for courage. "Home," she repeated under her breath, the word twisting cold in her gut. "But how? What do you mean?" He cocked his head, eyes glinting like embers. "This town doesn't just keep memories, it traps souls. Every 4th of July, the veil thins, and the lost come back. Emily, and those who vanished before her. They don't leave. They don't rest." Mark's voice was steady despite the fear. "Why? Why here? Why now?" The keeper's smile grew cruel. "Because they remember." Because the fire's never really gone out. The celebration masks a darker truth, one rooted in a past the town refuses to face. Jenna felt cold sweat bead on her forehead. What past? The man gestured toward the window. Beyond, the street twisted unnaturally, buildings warped as if seen through a warped mirror. Shadows moved without sources, and the ghostly children pressed close, their hollow eyes fixed on the diner like predators stalking prey. Decades ago, a fire tore through Hollow's End. Not an accident, something darker. The children trapped in those flames were never saved. Their souls chained to this place, screaming for release. Jenna swallowed hard, the weight of the story settling like ash in her chest. So, the fireworks show, it's a trap. Exactly. The noise, the lights, they call them back. And every year someone gets caught. Mark's eyes locked on the keeper. So what do we do? How do we stop it? The man's expression darkened. You don't. Not tonight. Tonight the past demands its due. The jukebox sputtered again, the distorted anthem warping into a chilling lullaby. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut behind them. Jenna spun around, breath hitching as the voices outside rose to a deafening crescendo. Welcome home, the keeper whispered, eyes glowing brighter. And the diner walls seemed to close in, trapping them inside with the restless dead. The doors slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows and echoed through the empty diner, cutting off any hope of escape. Jenna's heart pounded so loud she thought Mark might hear it through the thick silence. She backed away, pressed against the cracked counter, eyes locked on the man who now stood blocking the exit. The dim light cast long shadows over his gaunt face, the red gleam in his eyes deepening as the air grew colder. Mark gripped Jenna's hand, his jaw clenched. There has to be a way out of this. There has to be. The keeper chuckled, a low, rasping sound that crawled beneath their skin. You misunderstand. You're not trapped because of walls or doors. You're trapped because this place has claimed you. And it will not let go. From somewhere in the depths of the diner, the jukebox's haunting lullaby slowed to a stop, replaced by silence so thick it roared in their ears. Jenna swallowed hard and forced herself to speak. Why us? Why now? The man's smile twisted, revealing teeth sharpened to points. Because you. Suddenly, the windows flashed bright with bursts of crimson and gold. Fireworks, though there had been no announcement, no one left to launch them. Emily's pale face appeared pressed against the glass once more, eyes pleading, desperate. Come home, she whispered, voice cracking with centuries of sorrow. Jenna's breath caught as the line between living and dead blurred. The ghost surged closer, and she felt an unbearable cold seep into her bones. Mark gripped her arm fiercely. We have to fight this. We can't let them win. But even as the words left his mouth, Jenna knew it wasn't that simple. Hollow's End had its claws deep in this night, and in them. And the 4th of July was just beginning. The weight of the keeper's words settled over Jenna like a suffocating fog. She glanced at Mark, searching for the fire in his eyes, the defiance that might spark their escape. But even he looked swallowed by the creeping dread, his usual bravado cracked and vulnerable. Outside, the fireworks bloomed again, flashes of red, white, and blue painting the dark sky, though the town was empty and silent except for the wailing voices of the lost. Jenna's flashlight flickered weakly, the battery dying with a pitiful buzz. She dropped it onto the floor, the light extinguished, and the diner sank into near darkness, save for the eerie glow filtering in through the windows. Why did you bring us here? Jenna demanded, voice shaking but loud. The keeper's smile deepened into a grin that seemed to stretch beyond human limits. Because you are the witnesses. The last to see Emily before she vanished. You carry a thread, a spark of life that the dead crave. Without you, the cycle remains broken. With you, the story continues. Mark's eyes narrowed. You're using us. You want us to keep this curse alive. Not want, the keeper corrected. I need you. Jenna felt bile rise in her throat, her mind racing for an answer, for any way to break free. The door rattled violently as the voices surged, the ghostly children pounding on the glass, their cries desperate and raw. Mark took a step forward, fists clenched. Then we'll end this story tonight. No more victims. The keeper laughed, a sound that echoed like shattering glass. Brave words. But the dead do not rest so easily. With a sudden, violent motion, he threw back his head and howled, a sound that seemed to tear the very air apart. The room shook. The lights flickered. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into shapes both grotesque and beautiful, memories of pain and sorrow playing out like a nightmare puppet show. Jenna grabbed Mark's hand tightly. Whatever happens, stay with me. Mark nodded, eyes fierce. Always. The moment stretched, charged with impossible tension, as the dead pressed closer, the boundary between this world and the next dissolving under the fireworks' unholy glow. And somewhere deep within, Jenna knew that whatever happened, the 4th of July in Hollow's End would never be the same. The ground beneath the diner trembled, subtle at first but growing in intensity, as if the earth itself was trying to tear apart the thin veil separating the living from the dead. Jenna could feel the vibrations through the soles of her shoes, rising up through her body like a sinister heartbeat. The keeper's eyes gleamed brighter, and his grin widened into something terrible, a mask of pure hunger. It begins. Suddenly, the windows shattered inward, sending shards of glass sparkling like deadly stars across the room. The ghostly children poured through the openings, their forms flickering and insubstantial, yet pressing in with an overwhelming force. Emily led them, her dress flowing like water, her black eyes burning with a sorrow so deep it threatened to drown Jenna's soul. Run! Mark shouted, grabbing Jenna's hand. They darted toward the kitchen door, pushing past overturned chairs and shattered dishes. Behind them, the din of spectral voices rose to a deafening roar. The spirits reached out with cold, translucent hands, grazing their skin with icy fingers that sapped warmth and hope. Jenna stumbled, the cold clawing into her limbs, but Mark caught her before she fell. Keep moving, he urged. The kitchen door was locked, but Mark yanked it open, and they slipped inside, slamming it shut behind them. The muffled cries of the ghosts pressed against the barrier like hungry wolves. In the kitchen's dim light, Jenna spotted an old iron skillet hanging from a rack. Without thinking, she grabbed it and held it like a weapon. Mark surveyed the room and spotted a back exit. This way! They raced through the narrow hallway, the sound of footsteps, some their own, some spectral, echoing all around. At the back door, Jenna hesitated. Beyond was the forest, dark and forbidding, but the only path left. Mark pushed the door open, and a blast of cold night air hit them. The ghosts howled behind the door, clawing at the wood as they slipped through the cracks. Go! Mark urged. They plunged into the forest, the trees looming like silent sentinels. The moonlight barely pierced the canopy, casting long, twisting shadows. Emily's voice floated after them, a haunting lullaby that promised pain and release. Jenna ran faster, lungs burning, but the forest seemed to close in, every step drawing them deeper into the nightmare. Behind them, the whispers rose again. Come home, come home! And in that endless night, Jenna realized that some fires never die, they only burn darker. The forest swallowed them whole, the canopy blotting out the moonlight until Jenna and Mark were running blind, guided only by instinct and the faint glow of Mark's dying flashlight. Every snap of a twig beneath their feet echoed like a gunshot, and the rustle of leaves whispered secrets Jenna wished she could forget. Which way? Jenna gasped, her voice raw from panic and exhaustion. Mark slowed, panting heavily. I don't know. We can't go back to town. That place. He swallowed. It's lost. Jenna's heart sank. So what then? Run forever? A sudden cold gust swept through the trees, carrying with it the mournful wail of Emily's voice. It was closer now, wrapping around them like a noose. "Home!" the voice breathed, soft and terrible. Jenna stopped. Mark collided into her, nearly knocking her over. "We have to keep moving," he said, but his eyes betrayed doubt. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled again, a deep rumbling that vibrated through the earth and into their bones. Roots writhed like serpents, twisting and curling, reaching for them with a terrifying hunger. Jenna stumbled backward, grabbing hold of a rough bark tree as the roots surged forward, blocking their path. Mark cursed under his breath. "It's like the forest's alive, trying to trap us." "Then we find another way," Jenna said, heart pounding. "There has to be a way out of this nightmare." A distant flicker of light caught her eye. Through the trees, faint and wavering, was the glow of the fairground, still burning, still alive in some twisted echo. "Look," she whispered, pointing. "The fairground. Maybe if we get there." Mark nodded grimly. "We try." They pushed through the underbrush, branches clawing at their faces and clothes. The voices followed, weaving around them, pulling at their memories and their fears. As they neared the clearing, Jenna spotted figures, ghostly silhouettes mingling among the broken rides and abandoned booths, faces frozen in eternal screams and laughter. Emily stood at the center, her eyes black pools reflecting the fiery glow. "Come home," she whispered again, but there was something different now, something pleading, desperate. Jenna took a step forward, breath shaky but determined. "We're not your enemy. Let us help you." Emily's face twisted in confusion, then sorrow. The other ghosts stilled, the oppressive weight in the air lifting just slightly. Mark reached out, voice soft. "What do you want from us?" For a moment, the night was silent except for the crackling of distant flames. And then Emily spoke, her voice barely more than a breath. "Release." The word release hung in the air like a fragile thread, trembling between hope and despair. Jenna felt a shiver race down her spine, the shadows around them pulsing with an ancient sorrow. Mark took a cautious step forward, eyes searching Emily's haunted face. "How? What do you need from us?" Emily's dark eyes held a flicker of something human, pain, longing, and a desperate plea. "The fire, it never died. It's trapped us here. Only when the flames are laid to rest can we find peace." Jenna glanced around the fairground, taking in the charred remains of old rides and scorched earth, a ghostly graveyard under the fractured moonlight. Mark's voice was low but steady. "You want us to put out the fire?" Emily nodded, her form flickering like a candle struggling against the wind. "But the fire's been out for years," Jenna said, confusion knotting her thoughts. "It's just ashes now." "No," Emily whispered, voice trembling. "The fire burns beneath. The heart of Hollow's End. Only it can free us." Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet vibrated violently. From the center of the fairground, a faint glow emerged, a fiery pulse emanating from beneath the cracked earth. Jenna's breath caught. "That's it. The fire's still alive." Mark's eyes darkened. "We have to find a way to reach it. To put it out." Emily stepped closer, her voice urgent. "But beware. The fire guards its secrets. The price is heavy." Without waiting for more, Jenna and Mark exchanged a determined look. Whatever waited beneath the earth, they would face it. For Emily, for the lost children, for Hollow's End. As they approached the glowing fissure, the whispers of the ghosts faded to a mournful hush. The fire beneath the ground flickered, alive with a terrible hunger. And the final chapter of the town's cursed 4th of July was about to be written. Jenna's fingers grazed the edge of the glowing fissure, a gaping wound in the earth pulsing with an eerie, otherworldly light. The heat radiated outward in waves, warm but not comforting. It felt alive, like a beast breathing beneath the cracked soil, waiting. Mark stood beside her, eyes wide but resolute. "What now?" We put it out, Jenna whispered, her voice trembling. But as she peered deeper into the glowing chasm, shapes writhed within the fire's heart, faces contorted in agony, hands reaching up as if begging for salvation. A guttural roar erupted from below, a sound like metal grinding against bone. The earth trembled violently beneath them, threatening to swallow the fairground whole. "We don't have much time!" Mark shouted. "We need to do something!" Jenna's gaze darted around, searching desperately for anything, water, dirt, anything that could snuff the fire's hellish glow. Her eyes landed on an old, rusted water tower at the edge of the clearing, half collapsed but still standing. "If we can get water from there," she said, "maybe we can drown the fire." Mark nodded, already moving toward the decrepit structure. "I'll try to open it." Jenna stayed near the fissure, watching the flames dance like tortured souls. Emily's ghost hovered close, her eyes pleading. "Be careful," she whispered. "The fire will fight back." Mark disappeared behind the rusted beams of the tower. Jenna's heart hammered as the ground rumbled beneath her feet once more. Suddenly, a fiery tendril shot from the fissure, snapping like a serpent toward her. Jenna stumbled back, barely dodging the scorching lash. "Mark!" she screamed. From the tower, a metal gate clanged open, and Mark emerged with a broken bucket, his face grim but determined. "Fill it up," he urged. Jenna rushed to a shallow pool near the base of the tower, rainwater collected in a rusted basin. She dipped the bucket in, the water cold and heavy. With the bucket brimming, she ran back toward the fiery fissure, the ghostly children's voices rising in a crescendo of sorrow and rage. She heaved the water into the glowing chasm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a hissing roar as steam exploded upward, blinding light flooding the clearing. The earth shook violently, and Jenna was thrown back, landing hard on the dirt. The fire writhed and roared, the faces within twisting in agony before the glow began to fade. Emily's ghost appeared, her form growing clearer, softer. "Thank you," she whispered. The flames retreated into silence, the fissure closing slowly like a wound healing. The ghostly children's voices faded into peaceful silence. Jenna and Mark stared at each other, breathless but victorious. The night sky above them bloomed with the first true stars of the evening. And for the first time in years, Hollow's End was silent. The stillness that settled over Hollow's End felt almost unnatural, like the calm after a storm that threatened to return at any moment. Jenna wiped dirt and sweat from her brow, her chest heaving as the adrenaline slowly ebbed. Mark sat beside her, a tentative smile breaking through his exhaustion. "We did it," he said softly. Jenna nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the now sealed fissure where the fire had burned so fiercely moments before. "Did we really?" Emily's ghost hovered nearby, her translucent form shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Her eyes held something new, peace, maybe even hope. "Thank you," she said again, voice like a gentle breeze. "The children can rest now." Jenna felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Will you go with them?" Emily's smile was bittersweet. "I will stay a while longer, to watch over the town. To remind those who remain that the past must never be forgotten." Mark stood, stretching stiff limbs. "So, what happens now? Do we just tell people?" Jenna shook her head. "Who would believe us? This town doesn't want to face its ghosts. But maybe that's our job, to remember, to protect." The first distant sounds of sirens reached their ears, the signal that the town's emergency services were finally mobilizing after the blackout and chaos. "We should go back," Mark said. "There's still people out there who need help." Jenna nodded, rising to her feet. Together, they walked toward the faint glow of the town, leaving the fairground and its haunted memories behind. As they moved, Jenna glanced back once more. Emily's ghost was still there, standing silent and watchful beneath the stars. The 4th of July fireworks may have been the town's curse for too long, but tonight they'd reclaimed it, a new beginning born from fire and ashes. The town's faint glow grew brighter as Jenna and Mark approached, the distant hum of engines and voices reaching their ears like a lifeline. The blackout was lifting, and with it came the realization that the nightmare wasn't entirely over. As they crossed the cracked sidewalks, small groups of townsfolk emerged from homes and cars, their faces etched with confusion, fear, and disbelief. Whispers spread quickly about the blackout, the strange noises, the eerie silence that had settled like a shroud over Hollow's End. Jenna and Mark exchanged glances, knowing the stories they carried would sound like fevered dreams to most. Ahead, a flickering street lamp illuminated the figure of Sheriff Daniels, his usually stern face pale and drawn. "There you are," he called out, relief flooding his voice. "We thought something had happened to you too." Mark stepped forward. "Sheriff, we need to talk. It's about the fire, the disappearances, everything." The sheriff frowned, skepticism etched in every line. "Sounds like you've been through a lot. Let's get you someplace safe first." Jenna glanced back toward the fairground one last time, where the shadows seemed to recede, the night air lighter. She knew the road ahead would be long, filled with questions, disbelief, and the heavy weight of history. But for the first time, Hollow's End had a chance to heal. As the first official fireworks exploded high above the town, bright, triumphant bursts of red, white, and blue, their light was no longer a signal of fear. It was a promise. A promise that some fires, no matter how dark, can be put to rest. The night air hummed with a fragile energy as the townspeople gathered hesitantly near the fairground's edge. Word had spread like wildfire about the strange blackout, the terrifying screams, and the eerie silence that had swallowed Hollow's End. The old fears had stirred once more, mingling with hope and disbelief. Jenna and Mark found themselves surrounded by a handful of curious faces, neighbors, friends, even some who'd long dismissed the legends as nothing more than childish tales. Sheriff Daniels cleared his throat, addressing the crowd with the gravity the moment demanded. "We've all heard the stories, but tonight some of those stories proved true." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jenna stepped forward, voice steady but soft. "There's a fire beneath the ground, one that has kept the spirits trapped here for decades. Tonight we put it out." Mark added, "Emily and the other children, lost to the fire years ago, they just wanted peace. They wanted to come home." The crowd listened, some skeptical, some tearful, others quietly nodding as memories surfaced. Friends and family they'd lost, unanswered questions that had haunted them. An old woman near the back whispered, "Maybe now they can rest." The night sky exploded with fireworks, brighter and more vibrant than Jenna had ever seen, the bursts echoing through the valley with renewed hope. As the final sparkles faded, Jenna felt a strange warmth fill her chest, the weight of the town's curse lifting, replaced by something like forgiveness. Mark grinned, nudging her gently. "Looks like Hollow's End finally has its 4th of July back." Jenna smiled, eyes shimmering with tears. "Yeah. Maybe this time, the stars really will shine." Days passed after that night, but the weight of what happened lingered like a shadow just beneath the surface of Hollow's End. The town began to stir from its long slumber, old wounds tentatively healing as families reunited and stories once buried found voice. Jenna and Mark became unlikely guardians of the town's secret, their names whispered with a mix of awe and disbelief. Some villagers sought them out, drawn by a need to understand, to find closure in the face of years of loss. One afternoon, Jenna found herself standing at the edge of the now peaceful fairground, where wildflowers had begun to reclaim the scorched earth. She traced her fingers over a weathered plaque commemorating those lost in the fire, names etched deep, a testament to lives forgotten too long. Mark joined her quietly. "You think it's really over?" Jenna looked up, meeting his gaze. "I want to believe it is. But," Mark said, his voice low, "sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it waits." A cool breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of a lullaby, the same haunting melody Emily had sung. Jenna shivered, but smiled softly. Maybe that's her saying goodbye. Mark nodded. Or maybe it's a promise that we'll remember. Together, they stood in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the first stars beginning to twinkle, a reminder that even in the darkest night, there is always light. Weeks melted into MO. Jenna and Mark settled into a fragile normalcy, their bond forged in fire and shadow. They became the quiet keepers of Hollow's End's darkest secret, an unspoken pact between them and the restless past. One warm summer evening, as the town prepared for the next 4th of July, Jenna found herself sitting on the porch of her childhood home, the evening sky painted in streaks of pink and orange. Mark joined her, carrying 2 sodas from the local store. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the horizon. "Do you think it'll ever come back?" Jenna asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mark took a slow sip. "The darkness? I don't know. But I think we're stronger now. We faced it. Together." Jenna smiled, but a flicker of doubt lingered in her eyes. "Whatever happens," Mark added, "we'll face it. Like we always do." As the first fireworks bloomed far in the distance, Jenna felt a chill wind brush her skin. For a fleeting moment, she thought she heard the softest whisper carried on the breeze. "Thank you?" She glanced at Mark, who gave a small, knowing nod. The past was never fully gone. But for now, the night was theirs. And the stars shone bright. Months passed, and the 4th of July in Hollow's End transformed into a night of true celebration, a night free from the heavy shadows that had long haunted its streets. The townsfolk gathered again, this time with laughter instead of fear, the night sky ablaze with colorful fireworks that painted smiles on young and old alike. Jenna and Mark stood side by side near the fairground's edge, watching the spectacle. The memories of last year's terror felt distant but never forgotten, like scars softened by time. "Feels different this year," Jenna said softly, her eyes reflecting the bursts above. Mark nodded. "It's like the town's breathing again." The crowd around them cheered as a particularly brilliant firework exploded, showering sparks like a silver rain. Suddenly, Jenna's gaze drifted toward the tree line where the forest met the fairground. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of white, like a girl's dress fluttering on the breeze. She blinked. The figure was gone. Mark noticed her sudden stillness. "What is it?" Jenna shook her head, forcing a smile. "Nothing. Just memories." But deep down, a faint whisper stirred, a reminder that some spirits, no matter how gently they rest, never truly disappear. As the last fireworks faded into the night, Jenna and Mark stood quietly, the stars overhead gleaming like watchful eyes. And somewhere beyond the trees, a soft voice sang a lullaby, the promise of peace, and the echo of a haunting past. The lullaby lingered in the air, a soft, haunting melody that seemed to weave through the leaves and settle over Hollow's End like a gentle breeze. Jenna turned toward the forest, eyes narrowing as the faint sound slipped away into the night. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Mark shook his head, his gaze scanning the dark tree-line. "Maybe it's just the wind." But Jenna wasn't so sure. The melody held a weight, a sadness, and a promise all at once, like a whisper from beyond, a reminder that some stories never truly end. The town's 4th of July celebration continued behind them, fireworks bursting high above, painting the sky in vibrant reds, whites, and blues. Children laughed and danced, and couples strolled hand in hand beneath the glow of string lights. Jenna breathed in the night air, feeling the fragile peace they'd fought so hard to reclaim. Yet beneath it all, the embers of the past still smoldered quietly, waiting, watching. Mark nudged her gently. "You okay?" She smiled, though her eyes remained distant. "Yeah. Just thinking about how lucky we are." He squeezed her hand. "And how strong." As the final firework blossomed overhead, Jenna whispered a silent vow to never forget, to always protect, and to keep the light alive. For in Hollow's End, even the darkest nights can give way to dawn. As the crowd began to disperse, Jenna and Mark lingered near the edge of the fairground, the warmth of the festivities fading behind them. The night was quiet now, save for the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional distant bark of a dog. A cool breeze stirred, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke, reminding Jenna of the fire that had haunted this place for so long. Mark glanced toward the forest, a shadow crossing his face. "You think it's really over?" Jenna hesitated. "I want to believe it is. But some part of me knows that the past doesn't just vanish." They started walking back toward town, footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts along the cracked sidewalks. Suddenly, Jenna stopped. A faint glimmer caught her eye near the base of a street lamp, a small, folded piece of paper fluttering in the breeze. She picked it up, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was delicate and almost childlike. "Thank you. I'm free now. But I'll always watch over you." Jenna's breath hitched. She looked at Mark, whose eyes reflected the same mix of wonder and lingering unease. "Emily," Jenna whispered. Mark nodded. "She's saying goodbye." Together they stood beneath the street lamp, the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak. The 4th of July fireworks had ended, but in Hollow's End, the light of hope and memory burned on. And somewhere in the shadows, a girl's laughter echoed softly, no longer a scream, but a song of peace. Weeks turned into months, and life in Hollow's End settled into a new rhythm, one touched by quiet healing yet forever marked by what had transpired. The townspeople cautiously embraced their renewed hope. The whispers of the past lingered in the corners of conversations and the edges of dreams. Jenna and Mark became quiet pillars of the community, their experience binding them in a way no one else could understand. They often met beneath the sprawling oak tree near the old fairground, a place where memories and new beginnings intertwined. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft hues of amber and violet, Jenna pulled an old, worn notebook from her bag. The pages were filled with sketches, notes, and fragments of stories, pieces of the history and haunting that had consumed Hollow's End. Mark looked over her shoulder. "You're still writing it all down?" Jenna smiled softly. "Someone has to remember. So it doesn't happen again." He nodded, his eyes reflecting both pride and sorrow. "We faced the darkness and came out the other side. But it's the stories that keep us safe." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the faintest melody, the same lullaby that had once haunted the night. Jenna closed the notebook, gazing toward the horizon where the first stars appeared. "Maybe one day," she said, "this will be just a story we tell around campfires. A reminder that even the darkest nights can end." Mark smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "I hope so." As the night embraced Hollow's End, Jenna felt a quiet peace settle over her. The town had its scars, but it also had its future. And under the vast, watchful sky, the past finally rested. Years later, Hollow's End had grown quiet but resilient, its streets once haunted now filled with cautious optimism. The fairground remained closed, its gates rusted but still standing, a solemn monument to a past that refused to be forgotten. Jenna stood before the entrance one warm summer evening, her hand resting on the weathered iron gate. Beside her, Mark watched the fading light with a soft smile. "We did a good thing here," he said quietly. Jenna nodded. "We did. But sometimes I wonder if the ghosts ever really leave." Mark chuckled softly. "Maybe they don't need to. Maybe they just want to be remembered." The sky overhead deepened into twilight, stars beginning to pierce the dusk. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grass, carrying with it the faintest echo of a lullaby, soft and comforting. Jenna smiled, a tear tracing down her cheek. "Good night, Emily." Mark stepped beside her, the two silhouetted against the darkening sky, guardians of a town that had faced its shadows and found the courage to hope. And in the quiet that followed, the past and future held hands beneath the stars, forever entwined in the heart of Hollow's End. The wind whispered softly through the tall grass surrounding the old fairground, carrying with it a faint melody that seemed to blend with the rustling leaves. Jenna and Mark lingered a moment longer, savoring the peace that had settled over Hollow's End. As they turned to leave, Jenna paused and glanced back at the closed gates. For a brief instant, she thought she saw a flicker of white, a silhouette that vanished before she could fully see it. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark squinted toward the spot but shook his head. "Probably just a trick of the light." Still, a shiver ran down Jenna's spine. Some part of her knew that while the town had healed, the stories and spirits of Hollow's End would always be with them, in the shadows, in the wind, and in the hearts of those who remembered. They walked away from the fairground, the last rays of sunlight fading behind them, the lullaby fading with the night. And somewhere, beyond the trees, a soft voice whispered once more, "Thank you." The summer after the fire's secret was finally put to rest, Hollow's End seemed almost like a different place. The sun filtered through the tall maples that lined the cracked sidewalks, casting shifting shadows over the peeling paint of old storefronts. Birds chirped in cautious celebration, and the scent of fresh-cut grass mingled with the faint saltiness of the nearby river. Jenna and Mark found themselves pulled into the rhythms of a town slowly shaking off its long-held fear. But the echoes of that 4th of July lingered in every corner. One afternoon, Jenna stood in the local library, fingers trailing over the spines of dusty books. She'd spent hours digging into the town's archives, searching for clues to the curse that had plagued Hollow's End for decades. A brittle old man approached her, eyes sharp despite his years. "You're the girl who saw her," he said quietly. Jenna looked up. "Emily?" The man nodded. "The fire wasn't the first tragedy here. There's a history no one wants to remember. You're brave to face it. What else do you know?" Jenna asked, heart quickening. He sighed, lowering his voice. "The town's built on secrets, broken promises, betrayals, and old grudges. The fire was the last spark, but the roots go deeper." Mark found Jenna there, and together they pored over faded newspaper clippings and yellowed letters, stories of disappearances, of people vanishing without a trace, of strange lights in the forest. The past wasn't done with Hollow's End yet. The air inside the library was thick with dust and memories as Jenna and Mark sat hunched over a table scattered with fragile documents. The dim light from the stained glass windows cast colorful patterns across yellowed pages, revealing headlines that spoke of despair and vanished souls. "Look at this," Jenna whispered, pointing to a headline from 1947. "Mysterious disappearances plague Hollow's End." The accompanying article detailed how several children and adults vanished without a trace over the course of a summer, their last known locations always near the forest's edge. Mark frowned, running his fingers through his hair. "It's like the fire wasn't the start, it was just the latest chapter." Jenna nodded. "And those disappearances all happened around the 4th of July too." The old man's words echoed in her mind, "The roots go deeper." As the sun sank lower outside, casting long shadows into the room, Jenna's fingers traced another letter, this one a desperate plea from a mother whose child had vanished decades ago. "Please, someone find her. The forest holds secrets darker than fire." Mark looked up sharply. "The forest." Jenna's eyes were wide with realization. "We never really left it behind. The forest has always been part of the curse." A sudden chill swept through the library. The hairs on Jenna's neck stood on end. "Maybe the fire was just a way to mask what's really alive here," Mark said. A soft rustle came from the stacks behind them. They both turned, hearts pounding. But the library was empty. Except for the whisper of turning pages carried by an unseen breeze. The past wasn't finished with them yet. The forest loomed beyond the edge of Hollow's End like a dark wall, its towering trees whispering secrets that the wind barely dared to carry. For years, it had been a place of fear and superstition, where the vanished were last seen, and where the fire's angry roots still seemed to pulse beneath the soil. Jenna and Mark stood at the forest's edge one gray morning, the mist curling between gnarled trunks like ghostly fingers. Their breaths came out in visible puffs, mingling with the cold air as they stepped cautiously onto the narrow dirt path. "This is it," Jenna said, voice tight with determination. "If we want answers, we need to face what's waiting inside." Mark nodded, adjusting the straps on his backpack. No turning back now. The woods seemed alive, the silence heavy and expectant. Birds fluttered nervously in the canopy, and distant rustlings hinted at creatures hidden just beyond sight. As they ventured deeper, the undergrowth thickened, and the twisted roots of ancient trees reached out like skeletal hands. Jenna's heart hammered in her chest, every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves jolting her nerves. Suddenly, Mark stopped, pointing to a cluster of symbols carved into the bark of a massive oak, a series of jagged lines and spirals that seemed to pulse faintly with an unnatural glow. "Look at this," he whispered. "Some kind of warning?" Jenna traced the symbols with her fingers, a cold shiver running through her. "Or a seal." They pressed forward, coming upon a clearing bathed in unnatural twilight despite the morning sun. In its center was a charred stone altar, blackened as if scorched by flames that never truly died. Emily's voice echoed faintly on the breeze, a lullaby woven with sorrow and longing. Mark swallowed hard. "This is the heart of it." Jenna's eyes filled with resolve. Then it's time to end it. Once and for all. The clearing around the altar felt suffocating, an unnatural stillness pressed down like a weight, as if the very air was holding its breath. Jenna stepped closer to the blackened stone, her fingers trembling as she reached out, hesitant but determined. Mark scanned the perimeter, eyes sharp for any sign of movement. "We're not alone here," he murmured. Suddenly, the ground beneath them vibrated, a low, resonant hum that grew louder, shaking leaves loose from the ancient trees. Shadows flickered at the edge of the clearing, swirling into shapes that wavered like smoke. From the depths of the forest, ghostly figures emerged, children with hollow eyes, faces twisted by sorrow and anger. Among them was Emily, her gaze piercing and filled with a desperate plea. "We were trapped," she whispered, voice echoing like a distant bell. "Bound to this place by fire and fear." Jenna swallowed her fear. "We're here to set you free." The altar pulsed with dark energy, cracks glowing with a faint ember-red light, as if the fire beneath had never truly died. Mark stepped forward, pulling from his pack an old vial of water Jenna had filled from the river, a symbol of cleansing and renewal. Together, they poured the water over the altar. The ground trembled violently. The spirits howled, a sound of anguish and release. The red glow intensified, then shattered like glass, sending a wave of light rushing through the clearing. Jenna felt the weight of centuries lift, a sudden calm replacing the oppressive darkness. Emily's form grew brighter, more peaceful. "Thank you," she said softly, the sorrow in her eyes fading into a gentle smile. As the spirits dissipated, the forest seemed to breathe again, the twisted roots relaxing, the air lightening. Mark looked at Jenna, awe in his eyes. "It's really over." Jenna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "For the first time in a long time, there's hope." They stood in silence, the dawn breaking over Hollow's End, bathing the world in golden light. The past was finally at rest. The first rays of dawn filtered through the trees, casting golden light over the forest floor as Jenna and Mark stood together in the clearing. The oppressive weight that had once gripped the land seemed to have lifted, replaced by a fragile but unmistakable sense of peace. Emily's spirit, now radiant and serene, hovered before them one last time. Her eyes, once hollow and filled with anguish, shimmered with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, voice like the softest breeze. "You have given us freedom." Jenna nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. Mark reached out, and for a brief moment, the two living shared a silent farewell with the restless souls finally at peace. As the spirits faded, the forest seemed to sigh. A deep, resonant exhale that stirred the leaves and carried away the last echoes of sorrow. "We need to tell the town," Mark said quietly, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into his features. "They deserve to know what happened here," Jenna agreed. "But we have to be careful. Some truths are hard to accept." Together, they retraced their steps through the awakening forest, the path now bathed in sunlight rather than shadow. When they emerged back into Hollow's End, the town was stirring, people stepping out onto porches, windows thrown open to the morning breeze. Jenna and Mark shared a look, a mix of hope and determination. The 4th of July was no longer a night of fear, but a symbol of renewal. And though the scars remained, the town was ready to heal. Days passed, and news of Jenna and Mark's journey spread slowly but surely through Hollow's End. Some listened with disbelief, others with sorrowful recognition, but many felt the heavy burden of the town's history finally beginning to lift. The fairground, once a place of shadows and silence, became a gathering spot once more. Children's laughter tentatively returned, weaving through the rusted rides and wildflowers that now bloomed where ashes had once fallen. Jenna found herself at the center of it all, both reluctant and determined. She organized a town meeting in the old community hall, inviting everyone to share their stories, their memories, and their hopes. Mark stood beside her, a steady presence as voices filled the room, some broken, some strong, but all united by a shared desire to move forward. An elder woman rose to speak, her voice trembling but clear. "We've carried this darkness for too long. Tonight, let's light a fire, not one of destruction, but of remembrance and hope." Jenna nodded, eyes shining. "We'll hold a ceremony every year. A way to honor those lost and celebrate the strength of Hollow's End." As twilight deepened, the town gathered by the fairground's edge. Lanterns floated skyward, carrying prayers and promises. Fireworks erupted overhead, not to scare or curse, but to light the night with color and joy. Emily's lullaby drifted softly on the breeze, no longer a call of despair, but a song of peace. The years that followed saw Hollow's End slowly transform from a town haunted by its past into a community defined by resilience. The old fairground, once a symbol of tragedy, blossomed into a place of gathering and celebration. New benches were built, gardens planted, and the laughter of children became a common soundtrack once more. Jenna and Mark remained close, their bond forged in fire and shadow growing stronger with each passing season. They became not only caretakers of the town's history but champions of its future. One summer evening, as the 4th of July fireworks painted the sky, Jenna stood on the fairground's newest wooden platform, a stage built for storytelling. Families gathered, eager to hear the stories of old Hollow's End, of bravery, loss, and hope. Jenna's voice carried through the warm night air as she recounted the tale of the fire, the spirits, and the courage that freed them. Mark stood beside her, eyes bright with pride and love. After the story, a hush fell over the crowd. Then, from the back, a small girl stepped forward, clutching a worn doll. "Is it true?" she asked, eyes wide. Jenna smiled gently. "Every word." The girl grinned. "I'm not afraid." A wave of warmth spread through the audience, a reminder that fear had given way to strength. As fireworks exploded overhead in vibrant bursts of red, white, and blue, Jenna and Mark shared a quiet look. They had faced the darkness, and together they had brought light. And under the stars, Hollow's End celebrated not just its history, but its future. The celebration lingered long into the night, the glow of the fireworks reflected in the eyes of every person gathered at the fairground. Children chased each other under the lanternlit trees, their laughter weaving a tapestry of joy that seemed to stitch the wounds of the past. Jenna and Mark sat on a bench beneath the old oak tree, the same one where they had once planned their final journey into the forest. The tree's branches stretched wide, sheltering them like a silent guardian. "Hard to believe how far we've come," Mark murmured, watching the last sparks fade from the sky. Jenna nodded, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "I still think about Emily sometimes. About all of them." Mark reached out, taking her hand. "They're at peace now. Thanks to you." She squeezed his hand back. "Thanks to us." For a moment, the night held only their quiet presence, the promise of something new born from pain and courage. Then, Jenna's gaze drifted toward the edge of the fairground, where the forest met the clearing. A faint shimmer caught her eye, a figure dressed in white, standing silently beneath the trees. Her breath caught. Mark followed her gaze, but the figure was gone. Jenna swallowed hard. "Maybe some spirits choose to stay." Mark smiled, a mixture of awe and comfort in his eyes. "Maybe they do." Together they sat in the quiet night, the town's heartbeat steady and strong around them. And somewhere, just beyond the shadows, a lullaby drifted softly, a song of gratitude, of peace, and of endless watchfulness. Months later, as autumn painted Hollow's End in fiery hues of orange and gold, Jenna found herself restless. The peace that had settled over the town was comforting but strange, like a calm lake hiding unknown depths. One crisp morning, she wandered back to the fairground alone, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots echoing in the still air. The laughter of children and the warmth of summer celebrations had faded with the season, leaving a quiet hush. As she approached the old oak tree, Jenna noticed something new, a small, intricately carved wooden box nestled among the roots. She bent down, heart pounding, and lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of delicate, hand-painted tokens, stars, flames, and tiny figures, each crafted with loving detail. A note lay folded beneath them, written in the same delicate, childlike script Jenna had come to recognize. "For those who remember us, and keep the light alive." Jenna's eyes blurred with tears. She looked around, half expecting to see Emily's ghostly smile. Mark's voice startled her from behind. "Found something interesting?" Jenna held up the box. "It's a gift. From them." Mark knelt beside her, his expression softening. "A reminder that even in the quiet, we're never truly alone." Together, they placed the box carefully at the tree's base, a new beacon for hope and memory. As the wind rustled the leaves above, Jenna felt the faintest touch, a whisper of gratitude, carried on the autumn breeze. And in Hollow's End, the past and present danced together, bound by stories, courage, and an unbreakable light. Winter came quietly to Hollow's End, wrapping the town in a soft blanket of snow that muffled sounds and softened edges. The once vibrant fairground now stood still beneath a frosty veil, the wildflowers replaced by delicate ice crystals shimmering in the pale light. Jenna and Mark spent long evenings by the fireplace in Jenna's small house near the edge of town. They shared stories and memories, their bond deepening with every whispered confession and quiet laugh. One night, as a storm raged outside, Jenna pulled the wooden box from its place beneath the oak tree, now safely stored on her mantel. She traced her fingers over the carved tokens, each one a reminder of the spirits they had freed and the lives touched. Mark watched her thoughtfully. "Do you ever wonder if we did enough?" Jenna looked up, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "I think that's the question we all carry. But I believe we've given them a chance. And maybe that's all anyone can do." Outside, the wind howled like a distant chorus, carrying with it a melody, soft, haunting, but not sorrowful. It was a lullaby, a song of peace that wrapped around the house like a gentle embrace. Jenna smiled, feeling the warmth of hope even in the coldest night. "Hollow's End is home," she whispered, "and we'll keep its light burning." Mark reached for her hand, holding it tight as the lullaby faded into the night. And in that quiet moment, beneath the watchful stars, the town's future seemed brighter than ever. Spring awakened Hollow's End slowly, coaxing fragile buds from bare branches and filling the air with the scent of wet earth and blooming wildflowers. The fairground, once dormant and ghost-haunted, began to stir with new life, soft green grass pushing through cracked pavement, and birds returning to sing among the rusted rides. Jenna and Mark walked together along the overgrown path leading to the old carousel, its faded horses frozen in mid-gallop, now bathed in gentle sunlight. The place that had once been a nexus of sorrow now felt different. A bridge between what was lost and what could be. As they reached the carousel, Jenna bent to pick up a small, delicate flower growing between the stones, a wild violet, vibrant and defiant. Mark smiled softly. "Looks like the town's healing, one petal at a time." Jenna nodded, holding the flower gently. "And so are we." Suddenly, a breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it that familiar lullaby, soft, comforting, and filled with promise. From the shadows emerged an elderly woman, her silver hair catching the sunlight like a halo. She smiled warmly at Jenna and Mark. "You've done well," she said. "The spirits are free because of you. But remember, the past is never truly gone, it's woven into the roots of this place." Jenna felt a shiver run down her spine but smiled back. "We'll keep remembering. And we'll keep protecting." The woman nodded, her eyes shining with knowing. "Good. That's all they ask?" As she melted back into the light and shadows, Jenna and Mark stood silently, the carousel's creaking gears turning slowly in the gentle spring breeze. And somewhere beyond the trees, the lullaby sang on, an eternal promise of peace, remembrance, and watchful hope. Summer bloomed fully in Hollow's End, the town awash with golden sunlight and the hum of cicadas filling the warm air. The fairground, now blooming with wildflowers and newly restored benches, had become a cherished gathering spot for locals and visitors alike. The carousel's faded horses turned slowly in the breeze, their creaking echoing like a gentle heartbeat beneath the sky. Jenna and Mark often found themselves there in the quiet moments between the bursts of laughter and celebration. The years had softened their wounds but sharpened their sense of purpose. They had become the town's unofficial historians, guardians of its stories and memories. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, a group of children gathered near the carousel, listening wide-eyed as Jenna recounted the tale of the fire and the spirits that once haunted the town. Among them was a boy no older than 10, clutching a small wooden carving, a star, similar to the tokens Jenna had found months ago. After the story, the boy approached Jenna shyly. "My grandma told me about Emily. She said she watches over us." Jenna smiled warmly, kneeling to meet his eyes. "That's right. And as long as we remember, she always will." Mark watched from a distance, pride evident in his gaze. As twilight deepened and the first stars appeared, Jenna and Mark stood together beneath the oak tree, the breeze carrying the familiar lullaby, a song now softened by hope and healing. The 4th of July fireworks would come again soon, but this time, the town was ready, not just to celebrate, but to remember and protect the light they'd reclaimed. Under the vast, starry sky, Hollow's End looked to the future with open hearts and steady hands. The night of the 4th of July arrived with a crisp breeze that carried the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass. Hollow's End was alive with celebration, the fairground illuminated by strings of twinkling lights, the murmur of excited voices mingling with the distant rumble of fireworks. Jenna and Mark moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and sharing smiles. The town's transformation was palpable, a living testament to resilience and hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, families gathered near the refurbished stage beneath the old oak tree. Jenna stepped forward, heart steady but full of emotion. "Tonight we don't just celebrate our country's freedom," she began, voice clear in the quiet dusk. "We celebrate the freedom we fought for here, in this town, among these woods, with these people." Mark stood beside her, eyes shining with pride. "Let's light a fire tonight," Jenna continued. Not to remember the darkness, but to honor the light that brought us through it. Lanterns were lit, their golden flames flickering as the first fireworks exploded overhead in brilliant cascades of color. The crowd erupted in cheers, faces glowing with wonder. Jenna felt a warmth bloom in her chest, the echoes of past fears replaced by a profound sense of belonging. As the night sky shimmered with light, she caught a glimpse of a white figure near the tree line, a soft smile on its face, a silent thank you. Mark whispered beside her. It's all really over now. Jenna nodded, tears sparkling in her eyes. Yes. And it's just the beginning. Under the stars, Hollow's End celebrated a 4th of July reborn, a night where past and present met in a brilliant, unbreakable light. The 4th of July celebration wound down as the last echoes of fireworks faded into the night sky. The crowd dispersed slowly, voices low with contentment, and a soft murmur of old songs sung anew. Jenna and Mark lingered beneath the oak tree, now glowing faintly with the light of the lanterns left burning on its branches. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it that familiar lullaby, the melody that had haunted the town for decades, now softened into a song of hope and remembrance. Jenna closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. Do you think they're really at peace now? Mark smiled softly, his gaze steady. I think they are. And I think they know we'll keep watching over them. As the lanterns flickered and dimmed, Jenna reached into her pocket and pulled out one of the wooden tokens, the star, painted carefully with bright colors. She traced its edges thoughtfully. We should leave these here, she said, gesturing to the base of the oak tree. A place for people to come and remember. Mark nodded. A reminder that even in the darkest times, there's light. Together, they placed the tokens in a small wooden box beneath the roots, a new tradition for Hollow's End, a symbol of memory, courage, and hope. As they stood to leave, Jenna looked back once more toward the tree line. For a moment, the soft glow of a figure in white appeared, watching, smiling. And then it was gone. Hand in hand, Jenna and Mark walked back through the quiet streets of Hollow's End, the lullaby fading behind them, a promise that the town's light would never truly go out. Seasons turned again, and Hollow's End settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. The town's wounds, once raw and bleeding, had softened into quiet reminders of strength and endurance. The wooden box beneath the oak tree grew heavier with tokens, stars, flames, and figures crafted by hands both young and old, each a silent vow to remember. Jenna and Mark often found solace there, beneath the sprawling branches that had witnessed so much sorrow and so much hope. One late autumn afternoon, as amber leaves drifted lazily to the ground, Jenna felt a chill that wasn't just from the cooling air. She glanced toward the forest, its edge dark and still. Do you ever wonder, she asked quietly, if the forest remembers us? Mark considered this, watching the long shadows stretch. Maybe it does. Maybe it watches and waits, not to haunt, but to protect. Jenna smiled softly. I'd like to think that. Their hands found each other's, fingers intertwining as the wind carried the distant echo of that lullaby, no longer a call of fear, but a song of watchfulness and care. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Jenna and Mark sat beneath the oak tree, guardians of Hollow's End's light, ready to face whatever came next. Because some stories never truly end. They only change shape. And in Hollow's End, the past and future danced together beneath the stars. Winter's first frost glazed the streets of Hollow's End, turning the town into a quiet, shimmering wonderland. Snowflakes drifted lazily from a silver sky, settling on rooftops and tree branches like whispered blessings. Inside the warm glow of Jenna's living room, a fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows against the walls. Mark sat across from her, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and shared history. Jenna pulled the wooden box from the shelf, a little heavier now, filled with the tokens that the town had left beneath the oak tree throughout the year. She opened it carefully, letting a few fall into her palm. "Everyone tells a story," she said softly, tracing the carvings. "A promise. A memory." Mark nodded. "And every story keeps the light alive." Outside, the wind whispered through the bare branches, carrying with it that familiar lullaby, a song woven into the very fabric of Hollow's End. Jenna closed her eyes, letting the melody wrap around her like a warm embrace. "We'll keep the light burning," she whispered. Mark reached over, squeezing her hand gently. Together. As the snow fell silently beyond the window, the town slept peacefully, its heart steady and strong. And in the quiet, the lullaby sang on, a promise that hope endures, even in the coldest night. Spring came slowly to Hollow's End, melting away the snow and awakening the town with soft blooms and fresh scents. The air was alive with possibility, and the fairground, now carpeted with wildflowers, hummed quietly beneath the morning sun. Jenna and Mark walked the familiar paths, their footsteps light on the earth softened by new life. "This town has changed so much," Jenna said, her voice filled with awe. "But it still feels like home." Mark smiled, eyes scanning the horizon where the forest met the sky. "Some things never change. Like the trees. And the stories we carry." They reached the oak tree, now surrounded by a ring of wild violets and daisies. The wooden box sat nestled among the roots, heavier still with tokens of remembrance and hope. Jenna knelt and opened it, pulling out a star painted bright blue and gold. "Do you think they're still watching?" she asked softly. Mark's gaze softened. "I think they always will." As a gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the faintest hint of the lullaby on its breath, Jenna felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a quiet certainty that the light of Hollow's End would never fade. Together they rose and walked back toward the town, hand in hand, hearts full. For in Hollow's End, the past and future were forever entwined, bound by courage, memory, and an unbreakable light. Summer's heat rolled into Hollow's End like a slow, golden tide. The fairground buzzed quietly with life, children's feet thudding against grass, the soft creak of the carousel turning, and the hum of cicadas blending into the warm air. Jenna and Mark often found themselves wandering there in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon and casting the town in hues of pink and amber. One such evening, Jenna paused near the oak tree, her eyes catching a flicker of movement near the forest edge. A small girl stood there, her white dress catching the fading light like a shimmer. She smiled softly, eyes full of a gentle knowing. "Emily," Jenna whispered. The girl nodded, then slowly disappeared into the shadows between the trees. Mark came up beside Jenna, his expression thoughtful. "She's still watching." Jenna's smile was bittersweet. "And she always will." As twilight deepened, the lullaby floated faintly on the breeze, a melody of peace, gratitude, and eternal watchfulness. Under the vast sky, Hollow's End slept soundly, wrapped in the promise of light and hope. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges as nightfall settled over Hollow's End. The fairground lights flickered on one by one, casting warm pools of gold onto the worn paths and blooming wildflowers. Jenna and Mark stood beneath the oak tree, its branches heavy with the weight of seasons past and memories kept. In Jenna's hand was the wooden box, now filled nearly to the brim with carved tokens, each one a silent testament to a town's healing. As the first fireflies blinked to life in the gathering dusk, a sudden breeze stirred, carrying with it the faint, unmistakable strains of the lullaby, the melody that had woven itself through Hollow's End's darkest nights and brightest days alike. Jenna closed her eyes, the music threading through her like a gentle promise. Mark's voice broke the silence softly. "It's still here. The song. The light." She smiled, eyes shining. "Because we remember. Because we never stopped believing." Above them, stars began to sprinkle the velvet sky, and somewhere in the distance, the carousel's faded horses creaked in a slow, rhythmic dance. Together, Jenna and Mark sat beneath the oak, their hands intertwined, hearts tethered to a place that had once been low. The summer nights in Hollow's End grew longer, each one filled with the gentle hum of cicadas and the distant laughter of children playing beneath the star-studded sky. The fairground, once silent and abandoned, had blossomed into a place of life and light. The carousel spun slowly, its wooden horses worn but majestic, gliding through the cool evening air. Jenna and Mark walked hand in hand along the path, their footsteps softened by the blanket of wildflowers that had taken root around them. Their eyes met beneath the sprawling branches of the oak tree, where the wooden box sat nestled among the roots, a growing symbol of hope and remembrance. As they approached, a soft breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the faint melody of the lullaby, now a song of peace rather than fear. Suddenly, from the shadows near the forest's edge, a figure emerged. It was Emily, no longer a restless spirit but a glowing presence, her eyes filled with warmth and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze, "for remembering me." Jenna smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "We'll never forget." Mark stepped forward, bowing his head in respect. Emily's form shimmered, then slowly faded into the night, leaving behind a sense of calm that settled over the forest and the town alike. Jenna and Mark stood together beneath the oak tree, the lullaby fading softly on the wind. The past had been honored, the present embraced, and the future, bright and unbroken, stretched endlessly before them. As the summer deepened, Hollow's End settled into a peaceful rhythm, the echoes of its haunted past now softened into gentle memories carried on the breeze. The fairground, with its patchwork of wildflowers and repaired rides, had become a place where generations gathered, a living testament to healing and hope. One evening, as Jenna and Mark walked beneath the glowing lantern strung between the trees, they noticed a new carving on the oak tree's trunk. It was a delicate spiral entwined with stars, a symbol neither had seen before. Jenna traced the carving with her finger, feeling a surge of warmth and connection. "Someone else is carrying this story forward." Mark nodded. "The town's spirit lives on. In all of us." Just then, a soft voice called from the shadows. "Jenna! Mark!" They turned to see an elderly man stepping forward, eyes bright with recognition and kindness. "I'm Thomas," he said, "a lifelong resident. I want to help preserve the truth of Hollow's End, so the past never repeats." Jenna smiled, welcoming the new ally. Together, they began to weave a new chapter, one where history and hope walked hand in hand, ensuring the town's light would burn through every night. As stars twinkled overhead, and the lullaby drifted once more on the breeze, Hollow's End breathed easy. Its story, and its guardians, had only just begun. Thomas's arrival brought a fresh energy to Hollow's End. He carried with him stories passed down through generations, tales of courage, sorrow, and resilience that deepened the town's collective memory. His presence reminded Jenna and Mark that healing was an ongoing journey, one that required the strength of many hands and hearts. One crisp autumn afternoon, Thomas led them to a small clearing deep within the forest, a place he called the Memory Grove. Ancient trees circled a natural stone altar, their trunks etched with symbols older than anyone could recall. "This is where the town's ancestors once gathered," Thomas explained, his voice reverent. "It's a place of remembrance and protection. We should restore it." Together, they cleared debris and planted new flowers around the altar, breathing life into the sacred ground. As twilight fell, Jenna lit a single candle atop the stone, its flickering flame a beacon of hope. The lullaby rose softly on the evening breeze, wrapping around them like a gentle promise. In that moment, Hollow's End felt whole, a tapestry woven from past and present, shadow and light. And beneath the watchful stars, its guardians vowed to keep its heart beating strong. Spring arrived gently, thawing the snow and breathing new life into Hollow's End. The town blossomed under soft sunlight, vibrant and hopeful. The Memory Grove had become a sacred place, where townsfolk gathered to honor their past and renew their commitment to the future. Jenna, Mark, and Thomas stood together beneath the ancient trees, their faces illuminated by the morning glow. "We've turned the page," Jenna said, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who had faced darkness and emerged into light. "But our story lives on, in the hearts of everyone here." Mark smiled. "And as long as we remember, that light will never fade." Thomas nodded, eyes full of warmth. "The past, the present, and the future. All connected. Hollow's End is more than a place. It's a promise. The lullaby, the song that had once been a haunting lament, now soared on the breeze, a melody of peace, courage, and enduring hope. As the town gathered around the Memory Grove to celebrate the 4th of July, lanterns floated skyward, carrying wishes and gratitude. Under the watchful stars, Hollow's End stood united, a town reborn, its scars healed, its light unbreakable. And somewhere, just beyond the trees, the faintest smile of a girl named Emily lingered, a silent thank you and a vow to watch over her home forever.